Welcome to Wisdom Woman podcast. I believe that is in constant change and growth, not in perfection, that we find happiness. In this podcast, I'm going to be talking with top performance professionals about tools, techniques, new ideas on how to develop your communication skills, use your creative thinking, be a team player, manage your tasks like a pro, be motivated, become an expert on relationships, and a problem solver. Everything you need to be 5 stars in all areas of your life. My intention is to help you develop your skills and find balance between your professional and personal life. My name is Betina Pflug, and I hope I can be your trusted advisor. Hello and welcome to another inspiring episode of Wisdom Woman, where we delve deep into the lives and lessons of some of the most fascinating and influential figures across the globe. I'm your host, Betina Pflug, and today we are exploring a crucial topic that resonates with many of our listeners: how the art of alignment can enhance this pet experience. Joining us is Patty Beach, the CEO of LeadershipSmarts, a TEDx speaker, and an evangelist for inclusive leadership. Patty's unique journey as an expat from a young age has profoundly shaped her both personally and professionally, enable her to master the art of alignment in diverse settings. I met her during a special training session we had with ICF Colorado, is the coaching association in Colorado, and I was impressed with her methodology for bringing alignment to organizations. And I asked if she could extend this concept to our expat community. Fortunately, she said yes, and today she will share her insights and practical advice that help expats navigate their journey successfully, using her expertise in finding alignment. Let's get started and dive into the topic with incredible Patty. Thank you so much for being with us today, Patty.
I'm excited to be here and to get to know you a little bit more.
Thank you. Thank you for being here again. Patty, could you start by telling us about your earliest experience as an expat and how they influence your approach to leadership?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I was born an expat. My parents lived in Venezuela, and they had lived there for about 9 years by the time I was born, and I lived there for 3 years. So very early in my life, I grew up in a family that was bilingual because they had raised and had other kids there. And then at 3 years old, we moved back to the United States. And there I was, the fifth of 6 kids. And they all spoke Spanish a lot more than I did. And I felt a little bit like an outlier to a certain degree. Later on in high school, we moved to Argentina. So I got a second shot at
Oh,
learning
nice.
Spanish, right? But I had this kind of like reticence to do it. You know, I felt in a way that I was moving from Venezuela to Alabama, the South, you know, from the deeper South of Venezuela to the South of the United States, Alabama, and then to Argentina. And all of that kind of bouncing around, you know, was sort of dissonant for me. And one other thing I was going to say about it is that I get to Argentina and I was very reticent to do it, but my dad was really committed to my becoming truly bilingual like the rest of my sisters. So he pushed forward, and I found that I had the language inside that I thought I'd lost. So that's just a little setup. But then I get to Argentina, and I went to an international school where there was 28 kids in my class and 13 nationalities. So it was a very
Wow.
diverse group of people. And throughout my upbringing, I always found these contrasts, like the contrast between living in Venezuela in an oil camp, living in Alabama in, you know, an oil family, and then moving down to Argentina and feeling sort of American, but feeling sort of international that way. Learning to learn Spanish, but not being a native speaker, being with people of so many different nationalities, and living in a family full of girls, but actually pursuing a career. Eventually, I went into a business myself that was mainly men. So I was constantly in a lot of huge contrasts through those experiences. Contrasts of rich and poor, contrasts of more sort of Western American style versus Latino style. Um, and I always found it to be really interesting how people made so many assumptions and misunderstood one another, or how a person that had been to so many places could start to see their own patterns, like patterns of being an American that were so invisible to me. But then, going to another country, like, oh, I didn't even know we do these things, that we use a lot of paper, for example. I figured that out when I moved to South America. So I feel like the whole thing just really set me up to be curious about people, wanting to have some more synergy across cultures, wanting to fit in, starting to learn that every perspective really had a lot of value, and that there's a lot of resistance to new perspectives. As a 15-year-old, I was very resistant to living in Argentina with my family in a new place. And so they just kind of set me up, I think, to just have an interest in how to synergize and allow for a richer experience, because you're letting in the diverse voices, the interesting experiences, new foods, new places, and new perspectives. As I say, changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes. There's a lot of different perspectives as you move up and down the latitudes. So just
And why do you think alignment, particularly, is so important for expatriates? I know you've been studying this topic for such a long time and applied in the professional area, but how do you think this, and why do you think it's so important for an expat
well,
learning how?
I believe alignment is important to every human, that the more we're aligned with ourselves and with others, the easier it is to do things, whether that's your spouse, your kids, your job, your boss, your team, your organization. So I believe alignment is important to all of us. But as an expat, I feel that it is a challenge to take your family and to move long distances, to pack up your belongings, to leave behind where you've been before and set up new patterns. And if your family's rocking the boat like I did with my dad, I gave him such grief, you can't believe. And in the end, it was a great experience for me. It shaped my whole life. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I think it could have been a lot easier than what I went through and he went through and my mom went through. Um, so I just think that having your spouse, whether that's or your partner, and maybe you're not married to the person, but you're moving with someone that's important to you, your family members, and the people you leave back home too. Sometimes they don't understand, and it's important to align with them what the relationship is going to be like when you leave. As difficult as expatriation is, I think repatriation is harder. Expatriation is exciting. You got to go to a new place, and it can be chaotic, but you kind of expect that. But when you come back home, I think sometimes there's almost like a shock of how to move back home and re-enter your place. And then the other thing is, expats are going into work environment where there are so many challenges. Like anytime you take on a new role, when you onboard yourself or you get a higher level of responsibility, it's an alignment challenge. So you add on top of that for expats the cultural differences. It's just even more important for them. There's a lot to take into account.
And what are some specific alignments challenges that expats often encounter when relocating to a new country, in your opinion?
Well, I think that, there's the first challenge of actually packing up your home and moving and where you're going to go and what you're going to have your new lifestyle like when you move there. Expectations of your partner and your kids. I think that those expectations, sometimes you're moving to a place where there's things set up for you and they've anticipated you're going to have these challenges and there's support. Other times you're going into a place where things are not set up for you. And so I think it's just like um, really important to get clear. What are your hopes and dreams that you're hoping to achieve? And what are your worst fears? How are you going to avoid those worst fears happening when you go to a new place? Some people are very adventuresome and some people are not as adventuresome. They like their um, things the way they keep them, and they like things tidy and clean. And a lot of times you're going into a new place, there's a lot of unpredictable things that are going to happen. So being able to have an honest dialogue about that and how you're going to approach those things can be really helpful, I think. There's the challenge of moving, setting up new patterns of how you're going to live. And then I think maybe how you're going to spend your time when you go on vacation. For example, a lot of times you're living abroad, you've got obligations still back at home with your family that's home. How are you going to handle those things? Because you leave the country doesn't mean you leave your whole life behind where you were before, right? That's still there. Yeah. And then there's the challenge of those are home life type things. Everything from packing up, and it could be, where you're going to live, what neighborhood, could be how you're going to set up the rooms in the house when you move in, all of those kind of things. How you're going to spend your time, what percentage of it is going to be, how it used to be and what part's new. For me, it was what school did I want to go to? That was a big part of it. Then you have things at work, like onboarding yourself at work, what your new role is going to be if you have a new team. They have a process called new leader assimilation, which is also be considered new leader alignment. How are people going to adapt to you and you're going to adapt to them? How are you going to approach building a team? And these are things that are not necessarily specific to expats, but I think sometimes you might need to align with someone that could give you some cultural coaching in case you're, not necessarily approaching things in a way that's culturally appropriate in the environment you're moving to. Could be very helpful to have that agreement in advance.
That's good. I would like to use your methodology maybe to simulate an alignment needed for the expats. And let me explain the scenario. Maybe you can help out. First, I would like you, if you can, briefly describe the methodology that you use for alignment. And secondly, maybe if we can use this example that I'm going to share with you, how can we use what you normally teach people to this situation? When you're moving abroad and you're married, normally one of the person in the couple has a job, né? So someone has been invited to have a challenge abroad and have an amazing job, and the following spouse need to adapt their career to be able to go together. Sometimes, for example, if they're a doctor, it's hard to validate their career. They will need to find something else to do and readapt and reinvent themselves to be able to find this fulfillment in their career. So how can we use your methodology to find this alignment of what can the following spouse do to feel also proud about their professional area once they move together?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you understand my question, but I think it's something
I totally understand it, Yeah, I mean, it's not only expats that have this challenge, right? Sometimes you have just married couples where one career is so big and requires the other spouse to make adjustments to accommodate that career path. So first of all, I want to just start off by explaining what alignment is, in case people are wondering what we mean. So alignment is when the parts of a system are in agreement of how they will pursue a goal. So that could be a team or a family, or in this case that you're bringing up, it would be spouses that are trying to decide the pursuit of the goal, how they will support one another in their career paths. That we have, most people now have 2 career paths in a family. We don't have the old traditional situation where one spouse is yay, get to, be home and have the housekeeper and the, cheaper, inexpensive housekeeper in the new country, which is kind of what my mom got when they were moving back in the day. So when you have alignment, both parties are really feeling that the goal and the way pursuing the goal works. So it can be a compromise. So sometimes compromises come where you're like trading cards, like I'll give you this if you give me that, kind of thing. But usually with an alignment, we're not looking so much for a compromise. We're looking for an optimized solution. And so their methodology has 3 principles and 4 steps and 5 C's. So the 4 steps and 5 C's is a process of coming to that agreement. But the principles of alignment, I think, are really important. So the first principle is called iterative co-creation. So this means that, it's not one and done. So sometimes you have, in the old days, I got a better job than you. Too bad for you. This is the way it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do. End of story, right? So that would be the opposite of iterative co-creation. That would be, one and done. So if we can accept that it's going to be an iterative conversation, it's going to take quite a few conversations probably for us to come to agreement, then that's the first principle. Then the second principle is the principle of Shuva. Shuva is an acronym that stands for see, hear, understand, value, and appreciate. So Shuva is the context. So we have to come into the conversation from a Shuva perspective. That means we both get to speak, we both get to be heard, we both get to be understood, valued, and appreciated. And when we value someone, we allow their way of thinking to inform our judgment. We open our minds to what the person has to share. And when we appreciate them, then we thank them along the way. So then we have the third principle of alignment, which is about opposite energies. So one opposite energy is important is facts and figures and feelings. So facts and figures are the objective things like we'll lose this much money if I pursue this career path, or maybe there's other facts and figures in this particular incident. And then there's the feelings. Like maybe money isn't the real important factor in my career path. So then we go to the 4 steps and the 5 C's. So the 4 steps are propose, probe, repropose, and close. So the way this should work is that I would believe in this case, if the person that is, they call it, I don't know if they call it this now, but back in the day, they call it the trailing spouse, right? The person gets the job. The trailing spouse is the person that's coming along. Historically speaking, person getting the job was the male. Trailing spouse was a female. Not always like that anymore.
No.
And it's pretty, when the trailing spouse was a female and a lot of men were getting jobs, there were other expat females usually could get to know each other and stuff like that. So it was a lot easier. But when it's a male, it's a lot harder. But my belief is, in this case, the trailing spouse would be the person making the proposal. So the trailing spouse would think about what they would need in this move to pursue the kind of career that they wanted to pursue and how they would go about doing it. Or whether if they were going to lay down pursuit of their career and take a sabbatical, for example, they might choose that. They might choose to go back to school. They might choose to pursue a visa in that country to get a job. They might choose to find a job in the company where the spouse is going. There's a number of things that could possibly work. So they would write up the proposal of what it is that they thought would be enough to satisfy their desires for a satisfying career path, given that they have this opportunity to live in an expat situation and that they would want to support the spouse moving into this career opportunity. So they would make the proposal. Then we would go into probe about the proposal. This is where the 5 C's come in. So there are clarifications. What is it we need to clarify about what this person's proposing?
Mm-hmm. So
Compliment.
that's the place where you do the questions and ask as many things as
Yeah.
well.
Help me
Mm-hmm.
understand what you're thinking. Why do you think this is a good way to go, right?
Uh-huh.
And we go into compliments, what we like about this person's idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talk about concerns. What concerns do you have about using this approach? Suggest changes. Here's some ideas of things that you could change. And then commitment. How committed are we both to this path? So those are the 5 C's. Then we go into reproposal. This is where you take all that conversation and you say, okay, given that's how you feel about it, with your concerns, given that this is how excited you are, not excited you are about this idea, here's a reproposal. And then you could go back through the C's again, or you could just kind of get a sense of whether you're getting closer. This goes back to the iterative. And then you get to close. Once you've decided that, yeah, this is the way we're going to pursue this. Ideally, you would get to a close when, you're both feeling optimistic it's going to work, some sense of consensus.
What I like from your methodology is that this phase, the step 2, the probe, where you get the spouse involved, it's so important because it's not just the idea of the person who brought the challenge or let's move to another country, but then on the probe phase, you bring your spouse to be part of it. So let's clarify the 5 C's that you mentioned. The clarification, a phase where you can ask as many questions as you want to understand what's involved. The compliments, the compliments comes first before the concern. That's super important.
Yes,
Try
super
to say the
important.
positive first, what you like about this idea. Then what are your concerns, not pointing what you think it will make it fail, but what are the concerns? Oh, what if that happened? Explain what are the shadows inside of you. Né? Then the changes that you propose to address those concerns, and those changes can come from your spouse, can come from you. And then the commitment is that what you agreed on. So I think those 5 C's are really, really important. I will put on the description of the podcast for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we'll offer this, a free alignment toolkit that has a cheat sheet in it. So they can see all of this in writing. For the listeners, they can download that alignment toolkit as a resource from listening to this podcast. Ideally, they'd go get the book and read it because it'll describe all these steps in detail, but it's really a great process. And I'm going to give you a little example. And I talked about this at ICF Colorado. So we have my husband and I, it's a second marriage, and we have a son who's been living in our basement, who's 21, and he was in kind of what they call the failure to launch process, which means sleeping in the basement all day long and playing video games and flunking out of school. Literally flunked out of, I think, half of his classes from the last 2 years. And so we realized we weren't really doing him any favors by sheltering him in our basement, that he needed to get out and kind of get a sense of what real life is like, and that he had this opportunity to go to school with our support, but it wasn't going to be forever if he was going to flake off. We're going to just provide this comfy spot for him. So in that case, my husband and I made a proposal for him on when we thought he should move out, how we were going to support him, and what he needed to do to support himself, and how long that support would last. And we put a lot of conditions in it. We put things like, okay, we will, if you go back to school, we'll support you at this level. every month, but only if you make certain grades, and only if you show us your transcript. So we put specifics in this proposal. And to be honest with you, we weren't sure how he was going to handle it because he'd been kind of, one of those teenage kids, like, rolling his eyes all the time. But he just took it in. It was we put it in writing, put it in front of him, and we let him know this is not, a mandate from your parents. This is a proposal for your consideration, And we went through the 5 C's on what that, how that would work, what would happen if this happened, what concerns he had. And then we said, okay, why don't you make the reproposal? So the proposal went from us, and we had the discussion. He made the reproposal back to us. Then we went back through the discussion. It was his reproposal. So he kind of handed it back to him. And we finished it. Well, to our surprise, this process took about a week. First proposal, was Monday, and the next proposal was like the next Monday. Well, by like Thursday, he was all excited about moving out. I mean, he literally had made a spreadsheet, had all these numbers on it, and we just went today to see his place where he's living, and he put a little projector on his wall, and he's got his bedroom set up like he wants. And
That's
it
a good
really,
example, Patty, because a lot of families who move, sometimes they have kids in the age that they're in the college or finishing high school, and they want to continue where they are. So coming with this agreement on how we're going to manage us being abroad and you keep being here, it's
yeah,
good. Your example is good. I'm glad your
right.
son is doing well. That was a good
It's still
approach.
working. I kind of surprised me. I being the queen of alignment, you think I would have tried it last year, but I didn't. I was like, oh yeah, this can work on teenagers. It's fabulous. But yeah, I think, it's an example. Sometimes, you don't reach agreement. Sometimes you have, like, very troubled kids who are committed to their parents being stupid and stuff like that. Right. So there are certain cases where it's not going to work because the kid's probably not going to shuva you, even if you teach them the acronym, you know what I mean? Or you try your hardest to. But it could be also with spouses. Sometimes, relationships become too difficult because you have an adventurer married to a person who wants an anchor. Like in my first marriage, my coach told me, Patty, it's like you're a hot air balloon and your husband is like air, sandbags, and your hot air balloon is just bouncing across the, planes. Like, how long are you going to keep doing this? Right. So I did it another 13 years and then I got a divorce, so, it doesn't always, these things don't always work, but it definitely does help if you have a relatively healthy um, environment of people that want to work well together, I believe. And in a lot of expat situations, it's exciting. The kids want to go, but they're scared, and the spouse wants to go. And there are, so many things to consider from like, do we take this picture with us or whatever, how much do we pack?
Yeah, you
Everything is,
mentioned kids. That's something important. I remember you doing an exercise where someone in the company comes and bring a proposal, and then everyone who is watching, people that belongs to their departments, they raise their hand in a certain way. I want you to explain that because I was imagining like someone, like a couple proposing to their kids, we're gonna live abroad, and have the kids raising their hands the way you suggested. It was so good.
yeah,
Can you
yeah.
explain this concept? And because it's sometimes the kids are afraid of speaking up, and I think that raising their hand in that way, it's so good. Can you explain how you use this in our
Yeah, I mean, I
corporation?
think I think that, in this case we had one kid, but if you had a lot of kids, you know, I think it would be really helpful to do, the parents come to agreement because kids like it when parents aren't fighting in front of them about how to do it. So ideally, the two spouses are in agreement. We want to move. This is how we're going to move. This is what we would do. And they do the proposal. They let the kids know, just this is a proposal. there are these 5 C's, that we're going to go through. You're going to be able to ask us these questions, and it's every voice matters, and that there's no wrong questions but you want to do it in this order. And I would just say that, for every C, you would just make sure that every kid gets to contribute, right? They'll raise their hand. And you wouldn't necessarily want to do the parental alignment in front of the kids and have the kids watching that. I wouldn't guess,
Yeah,
but
maybe
you
the
can do
parents
that.
alarm. Yeah. But
Ideally,
I
the parents
remember
will align.
you're asking people to raise their hands in different ways, if they agree or
Well,
not, more or less.
this
How does that work?
yes. Oh, okay. Now I got you. The question. So when you get to the commitment test, right? So you talk about commitment. You say, well, how committed are we? Are we
Uh-huh.
committed? Yes or no, yay or nay. Well, that's really not enough information. Ideally, you use what's called the fist to 5 method, right? So when you say, okay, how committed are you to this plan? The question you would ask. And you would say, okay, we want you to show on a scale of 0, which is the fist, to 5. A 0 means it's a block. Like, I am not going, no way, no how. You'll have to drag me out of the house, right? So that would be a
Uh-huh.
block, right? So then we have a 1, which means I'm not in agreement. This plan does not make sense to me. I really don't like it. We need to keep talking about it. A 2 would mean I don't really like the plan the way it is. There's some minor changes we need to talk about before we make a decision. A
Mhm.
3 means I can live with this. Like, I don't really love it, but I could live with it. Like, I'll just go with it because it's not bad enough for me to stop it. Then we go to a 4. I really kind of like this idea.
Mhm.
And a 5 means I am so super excited. I am 100% behind this. So those are the different levels. And when you would say the kids, ideally, you would say, okay, we want to get commitment test based on what we've shown you, the proposal. Ideally, you would say, okay, kids, put your head down so you can't cheat off each other. Because
Uh-huh.
sometimes big brother puts a 1, and it kind of makes everybody put a 1. You know what I mean? Because you've got the alpha kid in the house. They would say. So you just kind of put the head down. You say rock, paper, scissors, shoot. And you see, if you got maybe a kid at a 2 and another kid at a 4, another kid at a 5, because kids are like that. So then you would just ask the next question. Okay, I see you're at a 5. Tell me why you're excited about this. Okay, you're at a 2 down here at the low score. What is it that's holding you up from wanting to do this? So it kind of allows you to suss out where you're at. So when we did this with our son, we said, okay, what's your number? He said he was at a 4. We said, okay, well, what else do you need? We would like to get you to a 5. What else would make it good for you? And he said, well, I just, until I know where I would move, I can't be at a 5. Like, I got to find a place first to be like really down for this. So we said, okay, it's good enough for now. But it allowed us to find out, was he really on board, or was he just, compliant kids, especially that are trying to be good, they'll say yes when they don't really mean yes.
Uh-huh.
And then you get them over there and suddenly they're having, anxiety attacks and, um, struggles with their friends. And, they just didn't talk about it beforehand, right? Which is when you really want to kind of get it discussed. So that fist of 5 commitment level, I write about it in the book, and it's a really handy tool. And you can use it without doing that whole process. Like, you could just say, hey, um, like, for example, when we move, I'm trying to think of something, but when we move, we're going to buy a van, for driving. You only have one car, for example, which you wouldn't do if most places. But you say, okay, rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Give us a number. And you can kind of see if you're already aligned about it. Then you don't have to have a big proposal and discussion, right? Sometimes, like, okay, we're already there. Boom. So it can be a nice thing to kind of let your kids know it's safe to be whatever number you're at. Let's really talk about it. And the number kind of gets them thinking, okay,
Mhm.
Am I really on board? Am I kind of hanging out and thinking, you know, wow, I don't even know what to think, right? Sometimes people are at that place because they've never experienced it before. Um, so they're just trying to guess whether they're down. But the important thing is transparency and allowing for every voice to matter, even the kids.
So you're saying that maybe we can use this methodology over and over, for example, until we have total alignment, at least 4 from everyone in the family on
You
board
could, or
with the
you could just
project.
say, we're going to do this no matter what, but we would love to have 4. So let's find out what it would take to get a 4. You may not
Mhm.
get to a 4. There just may not be enough um, consensus there, and you just know that you're going without that level of commitment there. But a lot of
Mhm.
times, you would say, hey, we're going to, we're moving to China. Okay, everybody down. Okay, whatever. And then you see the kids roll their eyes and they're not really in it, right? You got to get the dialogue going to find out, well, what is their true feeling so you can support them in getting those needs met.
Yeah, I
And
like because the
addressed.
methodology can work in any kind of situation for the couple to get in consensus of what they want after they're committed with their goal, then explaining to their kids. And I think the next step will be talking with the family members who will stay in the country that you're living. And it's important for you to come already aligned as a family to talk with your um, not parents, your family, so they can also include their concerns and all the changes that needed to be done. For example, if you have
Yeah.
an elderly parent at home or someone sick or one of your kids wants to stay. So this methodology, the art of alignment, it's so important, as Patty was mentioned, also at your work. So I truly recommend you to buy the book. Can they find the book on Amazon, Patty?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. The Art of Alignment, a practical guide to inclusive leadership.
And we'll
And
put the details also on the description,
yeah,
but it's so important because you can use at work as well. You're arriving in a new job and you need to find alignment to propose your ideas, but you want everyone to be on board and be an inclusive leader. It's something that will differentiate yourself in the market.
if you get good at this with your kids, you'll be excellent at it at work.
Yeah, I love what Sadhguru says, that the family members are our quality control. When you think you're good professionally and you go home and then your kids just poke your bottom and test you that you're not good in aligning.
Exactly. They're your teachers, right? To be
Yes.
patient and yeah. I mean, the book was really written for the work context, but it works in every context. It works it can even work in talking about intimacy with your partner or whatever. I mean, it could be anything really, which is just you want to align on something, a sensitive topic, or it could be a strategic plan. It could be an organizational, cultural, restructuring or something. It could be anything like that. So it's a very useful. Anytime you want to get something done with other people, it's a
Yes,
useful tool.
when working with nonprofits as well, you have so many volunteers that this alignment is so important because everyone wants to have the feeling that they participated on the decision. And if you can bring them on board to be part of the decision, to be part of the solution, then you have a 5 or 4 at least. You probably
Mhm.
won't be able to have 5 from all of them, but having a 4 and everybody cheering up to make it happen, that's a plus, and that's
Yeah.
when you have the commitment to be successful as an expat and as a leader as well, isn't it?
And having the courage to be transparent and to say no if you don't have alignment, to go, okay, let's not do it if we're not aligned. That might be the right answer. It's not selling and telling. It's not designed for selling and telling. It's designed for co-creation. That's what it's designed for. True co-creation.
It's beautiful. And for those interested in exploring alignment further, where can they find those resources, course, and a community, and how they can get in touch with you to?
Well, our website is leadershipsmarts.com. That's leadershipsmarts, SMARTS, like multiple intelligence.com, leadershipsmarts.com. And the book can be found on Amazon. It's really easy to get. And I also have a TEDx talk out there called Shuva, The Secret to Inclusive Leadership. So there are free resources available out there, and your podcast hopefully gives them just a little window. I really will say that we've covered a lot here, some of the basics of it, but I feel like the book covers a lot of things. Like the last chapter has a chapter about disruptors to alignment and people that are kind of acting up a little bit. So that can be kind of handy, because as good as you might be at fielding the process, there's always those kind of unexpected things that'll show up. So there's a lot of richness in there that I think is worth a read.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And that wraps up our another enriching episode of Wisdom Woman. A huge thank you for Patty Beach for sharing her invaluable insights and strategies on art of alignment for expats. It's clear that mastering alignment can truly transform an expat experience. I'm about to move again, and I'm sure I'm going to use this method with my family. So this offer not just a smoother transition, but also a more fulfillment personal in professional lives, because as she was saying, you're going to have everyone involved. If today's conversation sparked a desire to explore how alignment can enhance your own life as an expat, you can go to her website. I'm going to put all the details on the description of the podcast. And don't forget, she has this alignment toolkit that's very good. I already have it here on my computer. And you can also visit my website and schedule a one-on-one session if you want to talk about any particular issues that you're having as an expat, and if you are trying to find alignment. I hope you share this episode with families and friends that might also benefit of understanding a little bit this power of alignment. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, with the right tools and a little bit of wisdom, you can face any challenge and turn into an opportunity. I look forward to connecting with you soon. Until next time, stay inspired and empowered. This is Betina Pflug signing off. Take care and thrive on. Thank you for listening to Wisdom Woman Podcast. To hear past and future episodes, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast channel. We appreciate your reviews. To give us suggestions for future show topics, please write to us at podcast@witty.tech. If you're interested in having me as your trusted advisor, schedule a strategic coaching session on my website, www.witty.tech.